He thought it was just another photograph, a peaceful sunset over the Grand Canyon. But what if nature had other plans? What would you do if you saw a wounded lion, eyes pleading, trapped on the edge of cliff? James made a choice, risking his life to save a predator. But could a single act of compassion change everything, even the heart of a ruthless hunter? And what happens when that same lion returns, but this time, to save him? Would you trust the roar from the darkness? Let us know in the comments what you'd have done. Would you dare trust nature? The sun hung low over the Grand Canyon, casting fiery shades of crimson, amber, and lavender across a vast sky so expansive it seemed infinite. Gentle wisps of clouds drifted lazily above, tinged gold and pink in the fading daylight, like brushstrokes upon a masterful canvas. Below stretched a rugged terrain of jagged cliffs and deep chasms, a mesmerizing beauty cloaked in silent danger. James Morgan stood quietly on the edge of a steep cliff, 36 years old, but already bearing the subtle lines of a man who had spent much of his adult life beneath the relentless gaze of the sun. He had a lean, athletic build shaped by countless treks through remote wilderness. Dark chestnut hair brushed carelessly back, exposing a face of quiet intensity marked by thoughtful blue-gray eyes that always seemed lost in contemplation. His faded khaki trousers and worn leather boots hinted at a man more devoted to practicality than vanity. A small scar on his left cheek, a memento from a prior close encounter with nature's unpredictability, served as a constant reminder of caution. James was a wildlife photographer renowned for capturing powerful, intimate moments between animals and their environment. His next exhibit was titled Last Light, an homage to the fleeting and majestic beauty of dusk, a project that brought him today to the remote northern rim of the canyon, far from the bustling tourists and well-traveled trails. Setting up his tripod carefully on a narrow ledge, James adjusted his camera with practiced precision, breathing steadily. The silence was profound, punctuated only occasionally by a distant whisper of wind and the soft crunch of gravel beneath his feet. He closed his eyes briefly, savoring the solitude that had become both refuge and purpose. Yet, the tranquility was abruptly shattered. From somewhere deep within the gorge came a low, trembling roar, a sound unfamiliar in its desperate, wounded timbre. James stiffened, heart accelerating with instinctive apprehension. He listened again, breath held tightly in his lungs, the camera momentarily forgotten. The sound repeated, weaker this time, edged with unmistakable pain. Cautiously approaching the cliff's rim, James peered downward. What he saw stole his breath completely. Wedged awkwardly among sharp stones and splintered branches was a mature mountain lion, a powerful male with a majestic tawny coat, now stained dark with streaks of crimson. The animal lay trapped, its massive front paw twisted painfully beneath a boulder. Deep scratches marred its muscular frame, evidence of a fierce and desperate struggle against an adversary, perhaps another predator or simply a brutal misstep along this perilous terrain. But what transfixed James wasn't merely the sight of such a formidable creature incapacitated. It was the lion's eyes. Golden, deep, intelligent. They met James' own with an expression that held neither malice nor rage, but an unmistakable plea for help. This predator, apex in its strength, was now reduced to helplessness. It was something beyond James' lifelong training, something deeply human that compelled him toward compassion rather than self-preservation. James hesitated, instinct and experience battling within him. Every rule he'd ever learned about wildlife photography screamed at him to step away, to document without interference, to never risk interfering with nature's harsh equilibrium. But the lion's eyes, those startlingly clear, golden eyes, held him in place, paralyzing every logical thought. As he considered his next move, James' fingers clenched reflexively. The animal had barely moved since he first saw it, its breathing labored and shallow. The quiet suffering was unbearable, pulling at an emotional thread inside him he hadn't realized existed until this very moment. Easy, James murmured softly, his voice barely above a whisper as he began descending the rocky incline, sliding carefully between treacherous edges and loose gravel. His heart thumped wildly, adrenaline surging through his veins with every cautious step closer. It took nearly 15 minutes, each second elongated by tension and fear, before he reached the spot where the great cat lay trapped. The mountain lion, sensing his approach, growled weakly, not aggression, but a guttural, involuntary reaction born of agony. James paused, mere feet away, sweat dripping from his brow despite the evening's cooling air. For a long, heart-stopping moment, they watched each other silently. James forced himself to breathe, speaking softly in a voice calm enough to soothe himself as much as the animal. "It's all right. I'm here to help." With deliberate slowness, he removed his jacket, revealing a thin, wiry frame beneath his weathered shirt. He assessed the boulder pinning the lion's paw. It was large but perhaps movable. The lion twitched, muscles rippling beneath bloodied fur as James reached for a sturdy branch nearby, improvising a lever to pry the stone free. Each moment felt impossibly delicate, balancing on a razor's edge between salvation and catastrophe. James wedged the branch beneath the boulder and pushed, straining until his muscles trembled. The lion, sensing movement, whimpered softly, yet astonishingly made no threatening gesture. The boulder shifted slightly, eliciting another painful cry from the creature. James adjusted his footing, ignoring the ache that burned through his limbs, and pressed again. The boulder finally rocked loose, tumbling with a heavy thud down the slope, echoing ominously through the canyon walls. In an instant, the lion's paw was free. The animal instinctively recoiled, snarling briefly from the sudden jolt of pain, causing James to stumble backward, nearly losing balance at the cliff's perilous edge. He braced himself, heart racing uncontrollably. This was the moment he'd feared most, face to face with death itself, dependent entirely on the mercy of an animal whose life he'd just saved. But the mountain lion didn't attack. Instead, the creature limped backward, testing its injured paw gingerly. Golden eyes locked briefly onto James' own again, as though imprinting a memory neither predator nor human would ever forget. Then, with surprising gentleness, the lion turned slowly and limped toward the shadows of a cave hidden deeper within the canyon's wall. James stood frozen, shaking uncontrollably as adrenaline drained from his body. He glanced down, noting blood stains on his hands, his own, mixed perhaps with traces from the wounded animal. His breath caught tightly, but relief soon replaced fear. For several long moments, James stayed motionless, absorbing the magnitude of what had just occurred. Finally, he turned and ascended slowly back up the rocky slope to his abandoned equipment. Gathering his gear silently, James felt a strange, profound shift within himself. A powerful awareness of life's fragility and the mysterious connection between humanity and wilderness. The sun had almost completely set, leaving only faint embers glowing along the horizon when James finally reached his truck parked at the trailhead. His movements felt mechanical, his mind lost in contemplation. How would he explain this event to others? How would he even explain it to himself? Driving away through the desert twilight, James glanced into his rearview mirror one final time at the looming cliffs behind him. Somewhere beneath their darkening silhouette lay the lion he had saved, a predator whose desperate plea had irrevocably altered him. As darkness settled across the desert, the temperature swiftly dropped, painting the canyon landscape with hues of navy and charcoal beneath a smattering of stars. James Morgan navigated the winding road back toward the town of Flagstaff, headlights cutting through the inky night. His mind spun relentlessly, replaying the lion's quiet departure and those haunting golden eyes that seemed to pierce his very soul. He struggled to comprehend the bond that had momentarily connected him to such a magnificent creature, challenging every natural instinct he knew. On the outskirts of Flagstaff, nestled comfortably within a dense pine forest, sat the small town of Timber Ridge, home to a tight-knit community known for their cautious hospitality towards outsiders. The main street was lined with wooden buildings, softly illuminated by amber streetlights, exuding the comforting scent of cedar and pine. At the heart of Timber Ridge, in a dimly lit back room of the rustic Silver Antler Bar, Marcus Black was planning his next deadly pursuit. Marcus, notorious among both conservationists and fellow hunters alike, was a towering figure in his early 50s, broad-shouldered, with coal-black hair threaded with strands of silver. His rugged face, etched deep with lines of cruelty rather than age, framed piercing, merciless blue eyes. Marcus's arrogance was legendary, matched only by his ruthless cunning. His reputation had spread widely after a highly publicized trial years ago, for which he narrowly escaped conviction due to insufficient evidence, leaving him embittered yet unrepentant. Tonight, Marcus sat surrounded by 3 trusted associates, discussing their next illegal hunt beneath the faded glow of a single yellow bulb. The men around him were typical followers, rough, hardened men with unkempt beards and weathered clothing, their loyalty driven by greed and fear of Marcus's wrath. Marcus unfolded a detailed map of the Grand Canyon region across the worn table, marking locations meticulously with a pen. These canyons here, he gestured sharply, are prime territory. Rare mountain lions, strong pelts, valuable bones. Our buyers willing to pay top dollar, gentlemen. But we must move swiftly and silently. He paused, eyes narrowing dangerously. Any interference eliminated. Across town, unaware of Marcus's sinister plans, James parked in front of the small house he'd rented for his temporary stay in Timber Ridge. The simple one-story home, quaint and functional, suited James's solitary nature perfectly, furnished sparsely yet comfortably. The soft glow of porch lights illuminated the home's cozy facade, welcoming him back from his unsettling encounter. As he stepped from his truck, he felt a new exhaustion weighing heavily upon his shoulders, not physical, but emotional, a burden of unanswered questions and inexplicable feelings that refused to fade. Inside the house, curled comfortably in the corner of the living room sofa, lay Jasper, a friendly old border collie that James had inherited after the death of his uncle. Jasper, 11 years old with black and white fur grayed gently around the muzzle, possessed keen, intelligent eyes and a perpetually gentle disposition. As James entered, Jasper lifted his head sleepily, wagging his tail slowly. "Hey, old friend," James murmured softly, scratching the dog's ears affectionately. Jasper tilted his head inquisitively, sensing his owner's unease, and pressed warmly against James's leg, offering quiet comfort. The following morning dawned bright and clear, sunlight spilling into the small kitchen where James brewed a strong cup of coffee, his mind still clouded by yesterday's surreal experience. While sipping quietly by the window, he noticed a vehicle pulling into his driveway, a forest green pickup bearing the official emblem of the local ranger service. Curious, James stepped onto the porch as the door opened, revealing a woman in her early 30s, dressed smartly in the green and khaki uniform of a ranger. Kate Evans approached confidently, her appearance striking yet practical. Medium height, athletic build, chestnut hair tied neatly into a ponytail beneath a beige ranger hat. Her emerald green eyes sparkled with determination and intelligence, yet carried the gentle warmth of someone deeply compassionate. Kate was known in Timber Ridge for her fierce advocacy for wildlife conservation, often clashing passionately with bureaucracy in her pursuit to protect the vulnerable species inhabiting the canyon. She had faced professional backlash for confronting officials over their lax approach to illegal hunting, but each setback only seemed to strengthen her resolve. "Mr. Morgan, I presume?" she greeted warmly, extending a firm hand. James nodded, shaking her hand politely. "Yes, but please call me James. How can I help you?" "I'm Ranger Kate Evans," she replied briskly. "We've had reports of increased poaching activities near your last photography location. I heard you were photographing around the northern rim yesterday evening. Did you happen to notice anything suspicious?" James hesitated briefly, recalling vividly the wounded lion. Deciding honesty was vital, he recounted his encounter. Kate listened intently, her eyes widening slightly when James described freeing the trapped animal. "You risked a lot," she remarked softly after he finished. "That was incredibly brave and dangerous." "I didn't feel brave," James admitted quietly. "It felt necessary. Something in its eyes, it was different." Kate nodded thoughtfully. "Your instincts were right. We've been tracking illegal hunters targeting mountain lions in this area. A particularly ruthless group, led by Marcus Black." "Marcus Black?" James frowned slightly, the name vaguely familiar from media reports of past hunting scandals. "Yes, dangerous and resourceful," Kate continued, her voice steady yet edged with underlying frustration. "We suspect he's planning another hunt soon." James felt a sudden unease tighten his chest, the strange bond he'd experienced with the lion resurfacing powerfully. "How can I help?" Kate studied him briefly, assessing his sincerity. "Stay alert, James, and contact me immediately if you notice anything unusual." As Kate departed, James found himself drawn back to the canyon rim, driven by a deepening urge to ensure the lion's safety. Packing quickly, he headed out, Jasper trotting faithfully beside him, sensing his owner's urgency. Back in Timber Ridge, Marcus finalized his grim preparations. "We strike tonight," he announced decisively to his companions. Quietly, efficiently. "Remember, no witnesses." As the afternoon sun dipped lower, casting elongated shadows over the landscape, James carefully revisited the spot he'd last seen the lion. Though the area appeared empty, he noticed fresh paw prints leading further into the canyon, prompting a profound sense of relief mingled with lingering anxiety. Returning to the trailhead, James spotted tire marks, suspiciously fresh and deep, clearly from heavy vehicles that shouldn't be on this remote access path. His pulse quickened, recalling Kate's warnings. Quickly, he took several detailed photos as evidence, urgency building within him. Nightfall approached rapidly, bringing cold gusts whispering ominously through the canyon. James felt a powerful, inexplicable compulsion to protect the creature he had saved, a responsibility beyond mere coincidence. As darkness blanketed the wilderness, he knew instinctively that Marcus Black and his men were close, driven by greed, ready to kill. James resolved firmly, gripping his phone tightly, to intervene at all costs, unaware that his life was about to be forever changed. James awoke at first light, restless dreams having haunted his sleep, images of the wounded mountain lion constantly replaying through his mind. He dressed hastily, pulling on a faded denim jacket over a worn flannel shirt and rugged hiking boots. Jasper, the aging border collie, trotted eagerly to his side, sensing the tension in his owner's demeanor and wagging his tail reassuringly. The dawn was chilly, and the desert air carried the sharp scent of sagebrush and dry earth. After a quick breakfast of strong coffee and toast, James gathered his camera gear and headed swiftly back toward the canyon. The winding roads were quiet at this early hour, bathed in gentle hues of pink and orange as the sun began to crest the distant ridges. James's thoughts raced. He needed assurance that the mountain lion he'd saved was safe, unharmed by the ominous threat of poachers prowling nearby. Leaving his truck concealed among a cluster of mesquite trees, James began hiking deeper into the canyon's remote territory, Jasper staying close by his side. He moved quietly, practiced footsteps minimizing noise, senses keenly alert for any movement or sign of the lion. Soon he noticed subtle tracks, a faint blood trail, and broken twigs, clear signs that the lion had passed through recently. Following cautiously, James's pulse quickened when he heard faint noises from a nearby cave tucked discreetly within a sandstone formation. Peering carefully around the edge of the rock, James froze. Inside the cave, illuminated by scattered shafts of morning sunlight, lay 3 lion cubs nestled closely together. Each cub was barely a few months old, their fur soft and fuzzy, eyes wide with a mixture of innocence and apprehension. One cub, smaller and clearly weaker, bore visible scratches and limped slightly as it moved. James felt a sharp pang of sympathy, realizing now the deeper implications of yesterday's rescue. He had not just saved one life, but an entire family. A rustle of dry grass behind him snapped James from his contemplation. He turned quickly, heart pounding, but instead of a predator, his eyes settled on something equally alarming. A large, unfamiliar pickup truck parked partially obscured by brush further down the slope. It bore no official markings, its sides muddied deliberately, clearly intended to blend into the landscape. Instinctively, James knew its owners had no legitimate reason to be there. Stealthily approaching the vehicle, James peered cautiously through the passenger window. His gut twisted with dread at the sight. Metal traps, lengths of wire, rifles, ammunition boxes, and cruel snares lay strewn across the back seat, confirming his worst fears. Poachers were here, dangerously close to the vulnerable lion family. A sense of urgency surged through him, compelling James to act decisively. He swiftly photographed everything with his phone, determined to report this immediately to Ranger Evans. Meanwhile, Kate Evans arrived early at the ranger station, her mind clouded by frustration from a contentious late-night conversation with her supervisor, Harold Brooks. Harold, a heavy-set man in his late 50s with thinning gray hair and a perpetually stern expression, had been a reliable leader for years, but recently appeared compromised, hesitant to confront any powerful interests affecting the park. The stress from higher authorities to downplay illegal activities had transformed Harold from an ally into an obstacle, a shift that deeply troubled Kate. Entering the modest ranger station, Kate nodded briefly at Deputy Ranger Matt Sullivan, a young recruit barely 25, tall and slender with sandy blonde hair and eager green eyes, constantly eager to impress. "Morning, Kate," he greeted enthusiastically, oblivious to her underlying tension. Kate returned a distracted smile, but her gaze quickly sharpened as Harold emerged from his office, expression guarded. "Kate, a moment," Harold gestured tersely. Inside his cramped office filled with maps and old photographs, he fixed her with a cautious stare. "I heard you visited that photographer yesterday. You need to tread carefully. Powerful interests are involved, and they don't appreciate unwanted attention." Kate bristled visibly, eyes narrowing. "You mean Marcus Black and his sponsors? We have clear evidence of illegal poaching operations. Why aren't we taking action?" Harold sighed wearily, rubbing his temples. "Look, Kate, my hands are tied. I'm asking you, please don't push this any further. The situation is delicate, and we both know these people won't hesitate to ruin careers." Kate stood silently for a moment, absorbing the bitter reality that the once stalwart defender of the park's wildlife had succumbed to intimidation. She turned without another word, leaving Harold staring sadly at his desk. Frustrated but resolute, Kate decided she could no longer rely solely on official channels. She would act independently, if necessary. Returning to her vehicle, she dialed James's number, anxious to learn if he'd discovered anything new since their conversation. James answered immediately, his voice low yet urgent. "Kate, I found their truck. Poachers, they're here, fully armed, preparing to trap lions. You need to see this." Kate's pulse quickened. "Stay where you are. I'll come immediately." Within half an hour, Kate arrived, quickly joining James by the concealed truck. She examined the contents grimly, anger flashing in her green eyes. "These people are ruthless," she murmured bitterly, "and protected by someone high up, someone powerful enough to silence Harold." James clenched his fists tightly. "We can't let them succeed." Kate nodded firmly. "They won't. We'll document everything. I'll gather enough evidence that even Harold can't ignore." As they gathered photographs and details, Jasper began barking urgently. James spun around sharply. From afar, faint dust trails spiraled into the sky, signaling approaching vehicles. "We have to leave now," Kate whispered sharply, pulling James toward cover. They hurriedly moved away, leaving no obvious sign of their presence behind, and crouched safely behind a dense thicket of juniper bushes, breathing shallowly. Minutes later, Two trucks arrived noisily. Marcus Black emerged first, towering ominously over the others, wearing heavy boots and camouflage clothing, a rifle slung carelessly across his shoulder. He surveyed the area critically, eyes narrow and calculating. Beside him stood Ethan Mills, a younger, leaner man with greasy brown hair and a perpetual sneer, known locally as Marcus's fiercely loyal right-hand man. Marcus barked commands, ordering his crew to unload traps and gear. He stopped abruptly near the hidden cave, inspecting the faint tracks. "They're close," Marcus growled coldly. "Set the traps carefully. No mistakes." From their concealed vantage point, James and Kate exchanged tense glances. James knew immediately he had no choice. Protecting this family of lions had become deeply personal. His encounter with the wounded lion had sparked something powerful within him, a bond of trust he couldn't abandon. Kate saw the resolve in his eyes and understood implicitly. Their shared determination deepened into a silent pact. "We can't let this happen," James whispered fiercely. Kate's expression hardened with conviction. "We won't." As Marcus and his crew moved off, leaving traps strategically placed to ensure a deadly outcome, James and Kate stayed hidden, silently preparing themselves mentally and emotionally for the dangerous confrontation inevitably awaiting them. They knew the risks, but refused to back down. The mountain lion family's survival and their own integrity depended upon the actions they would soon take. Darkness was descending rapidly, turning the desert landscape into a cold, shadowy maze. James crouched silently behind a cluster of gnarled junipers, his heart pounding with every shallow breath. Beside him, Ranger Kate Evans remained equally still, her eyes intense, vigilant, scanning the dim surroundings for signs of danger. The chill of the coming night bit through James's worn denim jacket, but adrenaline surged hotly through his veins, drowning out the cold. Nearby, Jasper huddled quietly, his intelligent, aged eyes watching James with an anxious expression, sensing imminent trouble. Suddenly, distant voices echoed harshly across the rocky terrain. James recognized the deep, unmistakable bark of Marcus Black, commanding his men to set more traps. Peering cautiously through twisted branches, James caught sight of Marcus standing illuminated by the beam of a powerful flashlight, his large frame casting ominous shadows. Marcus moved with calculated authority, his broad shoulders and muscular build accentuating his dominance over the rough crew assembled around him. His voice was cold, efficient, utterly devoid of compassion or hesitation. James felt a surge of anger. The animals he'd spent his life admiring through the lens of a camera were now under direct threat, and the memory of those golden eyes, the lion's quiet plea for help, burned fiercely within him. He glanced toward Kate, whose expression mirrored his determination. Their silent resolve to protect these creatures forged an unspoken bond between them. "We have to do something," James whispered urgently, voice low but firm. Kate nodded gravely. "Agreed. But we're heavily outnumbered, James. Confrontation could turn deadly. We must proceed carefully." James considered her words, but a sudden crackling noise caught their attention. Both instinctively turned their heads towards a narrow path winding down into the canyon's heart, where Marcus's men had just activated a hidden snare, expertly camouflaged beneath brush and loose soil. Moments later, the faint, panicked growl of a trapped animal filled the night air. James's stomach tightened, heart dropping instantly. Marcus and his team immediately converged upon the noise, flashlights slicing through darkness like blades, illuminating their predatory movements. Unable to stand idle, James stepped forward impulsively, only to feel Kate's firm grip on his arm pulling him back. "Wait," she whispered sharply, her voice barely audible but urgent. Rushing in now could get us both killed. James forced himself to pause, chest rising and falling heavily, knowing she was right, but hating every moment of inaction. In his frustration, he noticed Jasper had slipped quietly forward, the dog's sleek black and white coat blending easily into the shadows. Heart racing with sudden fear, James urgently motioned for Jasper to return, but the dog ignored him, ears perked, nose pointed intently toward the captured creature. Within seconds, the group of hunters reached the snare, Marcus grinning coldly as he illuminated their catch. It was the smallest lion cub, struggling desperately, one paw trapped painfully within the cruel metal jaws. James clenched his fists, anguish churning violently inside him. Marcus's associate, Ethan Mills, stepped forward, a twisted smile spreading slowly across his lean face. Ethan, wiry and mean-eyed with greasy brown hair falling into his narrow eyes, was known locally for his cruel streak, always eager to inflict suffering. "This little one's bait," Ethan sneered. "The others won't be far." Marcus nodded coldly. "Good. Prepare additional traps around this area." Hidden in the shadows, James's blood ran cold. Kate's face was tight, jaw clenched, their silent horror magnified when Marcus casually ordered Ethan to harm the cub slightly more, ensuring its cries would attract the mother. Suddenly, Jasper emitted a low, defiant growl, exposing their hiding place. Marcus spun instantly, flashlight beam catching James and Kate clearly. "Intruders!" Marcus shouted furiously. Caught, James straightened defiantly, stepping protectively in front of Kate. Jasper trotted quickly to his owner's side, snarling menacingly despite his advanced age. Marcus approached confidently, flanked by his men. James Morgan, the photographer. Marcus mocked, eyes cold and calculating. "Sticking your nose where it doesn't belong." James met Marcus gaze boldly. "Let the cub go," he demanded, voice firm but trembling slightly. "You don't have to do this." Marcus laughed, bitter and mocking. "Oh, but I do. It's business. Now leave, or suffer the consequences." Kate stepped forward, holding her badge high, her voice strong despite the obvious danger. "Marcus, this ends tonight. I have enough evidence to shut you down permanently." Marcus smiled cruelly, eyes narrowing dangerously. "Evidence disappears, Ranger Evans. And so do people who interfere." Suddenly aware of the imminent peril, James felt genuine fear surge through him, chilling and immediate. His career, his very life, hung in the balance, yet retreating felt unthinkable. Beside him, Jasper pressed protectively against his leg, steadfast loyalty radiating through every fiber of the aging dog's being. A tense silence settled over the group, broken abruptly by distant growling. Marcus snapped his head around sharply, realizing instantly the mother lion had arrived, drawn by her cub's distress. From the shadows emerged the same lion James had rescued days before. Majestic, fierce, and now enraged. Despite limping slightly from its earlier injuries, the massive animal stared directly at Marcus, golden eyes blazing with primal fury. James's breath caught sharply, recognizing immediately the connection. The lion had come not merely to rescue its offspring, but perhaps sensing James's presence, returning trust for trust. Marcus swiftly raised his rifle, aiming deliberately at the lion. James acted without thought, lunging forward and grabbing Marcus's arm, struggling desperately for control of the weapon. In a flurry of chaos, Jasper leaped fiercely onto Ethan's leg, biting deeply into the man's calf, causing Ethan to collapse, screaming. Marcus fought brutally, overpowering James quickly and throwing him violently to the ground. Gasping painfully, James stared helplessly upward as Marcus aimed once more, finger tightening on the trigger. At that critical instant, a shot rang out. Kate had fired her Ranger-issued pistol into the air, causing Marcus's men to scatter momentarily in confusion. Seizing the distraction, the lion lunged bravely forward, roaring mightily, forcing Marcus to stumble backward in shock. James scrambled painfully to his feet, grabbing Jasper, calling urgently to Kate. "Run!" he shouted desperately, retreating into the darkness alongside Kate and Jasper, racing away from immediate danger, but knowing this conflict was far from over. As they fled, Marcus's voice echoed ominously behind them, filled with chilling rage. "This isn't over, Morgan." Breathless, Battered, but alive, James and Kate stopped briefly beneath the protective cover of towering sandstone formations. Jasper lay, quietly panting, his bravery unquestionable. James turned solemnly toward Kate, gratitude and concern mingling intensely within him. This just escalated into something deadly serious, Kate whispered quietly, eyes wide, chest heaving with adrenaline. James nodded grimly, fully aware now of the harsh truth. He'd crossed a dangerous threshold tonight, endangering his life, his career, everything he'd built, all to protect a family of lions. Yet he knew deep within himself he would do it again without hesitation. He'd forged a strange but undeniable bond with these wild creatures, whose lives now rested entirely within his hands. The moon rose high, casting a pale silver light across the rugged terrain, bathing the Grand Canyon in an ethereal glow. Shadows stretched ominously between twisted rock formations and scattered shrubs, the chill air carrying whispers of tension through the darkness. James Morgan felt his breath come in short, shallow bursts as adrenaline surged through his veins. Beside him, Ranger Kate Evans kept a wary eye on their surroundings, her posture alert, every muscle in her lean body tensed and ready. Jasper, James's old border collie, stayed loyally at his side, eyes fixed anxiously on the unfolding scene ahead. Marcus Black stood illuminated in the harsh beams of his men's flashlights, a sinister smirk pulling at his rugged features. At his feet lay the injured lion cub, trembling in pain and fear, paw ensnared in a cruel metal trap. The cub's soft whimpers cut sharply through James, igniting a fierce anger that burned brighter than his fear. Marcus's men circled restlessly around him, faces hidden behind shadows, expressions hardened by years of ruthless endeavors. From their concealed position, James and Kate watched as Marcus glanced triumphantly toward the distant caves, calling out mockingly into the darkness. "Come out, kitty. Let's finish this tonight." James's fists clenched tightly, every instinct screaming at him to intervene. Just as he shifted his weight forward, Kate placed a steadying hand on his shoulder, her voice urgent yet controlled. "James, careful. We have to be strategic. Marcus won't hesitate to kill." "I can't let them do this," James whispered hoarsely, eyes locked onto the helpless cub. Before Kate could reply, a low, guttural growl resonated through the shadows, primal and fierce. From the darkness emerged the powerful figure of the lion James had rescued days earlier, its majestic frame illuminated briefly beneath the moonlight. Its amber eyes gleamed fiercely, fixed unwaveringly on Marcus, limping slightly but exuding unmistakable authority and rage. It positioned itself protectively between the poachers and its cub, muscles rippling beneath its tawny coat, poised for confrontation. Marcus laughed coldly, eyes narrowed dangerously. "Well, look who decided to show up." He casually raised his rifle, aiming steadily at the defiant creature. "Too bad you'll never leave this canyon alive." Unable to contain himself any longer, James stepped abruptly from cover, heart hammering furiously within his chest. "Stop!" he shouted forcefully, voice echoing sharply against the canyon walls. Every head snapped toward him, Marcus's finger pausing fractionally on the trigger. Marcus smiled chillingly, lowering his rifle slightly, amused by James's bravery. "Morgan, you're becoming quite the nuisance." "But ends tonight." James stood firm, jaw clenched defiantly despite the fear gnawing inside him. "I've documented everything, Marcus," he declared boldly, voice steady despite the tremors in his limbs. "You're poaching your threats. Kill me, and you'll never silence the truth. It'll only make things worse for you." Marcus's eyes flashed dangerously. "You're bluffing, photographer. Even if you're not, dead men tell no tales." He lifted his rifle once more, this time aiming directly at James's chest. James swallowed hard, pulse thundering loudly in his ears. Every fiber of his being tensed, waiting for the inevitable moment Marcus would pull the trigger. Beside him, Kate shouted a desperate plea, reaching instinctively for her holster. Just as Marcus's finger tightened on the trigger, the wounded lion surged forward with shocking speed, a blur of powerful muscle and raw fury. Marcus barely had time to register the attack before the animal collided violently with him, sending the rifle clattering away across the rocky ground. Marcus cried out in surprise and pain, stumbling backward toward the canyon's precarious edge, hands desperately grasping for balance. In a heartbeat, Marcus's footing vanished, and he plunged backward into the darkness below. His terrified scream echoed through the canyon as his hands grasped wildly, catching at the last possible instant onto the thick, gnarled branch of a juniper tree that protruded defiantly from the rocky cliff face. James rushed to the cliff's edge, breathless, staring down at Marcus, who now dangled precariously above the yawning abyss, fingers turning white from desperation. Marcus looked up, panic clouding his formerly cold, confident eyes. "Help me!" he screamed hoarsely, his bravado entirely stripped away. Behind James, the lion stood motionless, breathing heavily, eyes fixed not on Marcus but gently on James, an expression of recognition passing briefly between them, a shared gratitude and understanding. James hesitated briefly, his heart torn between a justified hatred of Marcus and the ingrained morality urging compassion even toward an enemy. Before he could move, Kate appeared beside him, flashlight illuminating Marcus's desperate face below. She glanced urgently toward James, her voice strained. "James, we can't let him fall. It's not who we are." Taking a deep breath, James nodded decisively, recognizing the truth of her words. Carefully, they positioned themselves, working together to pull Marcus slowly up from certain death, muscles burning from the strain. As they finally hauled him safely on his solid ground, Marcus collapsed, breathing raggedly, all fight gone from his defeated form. James stood over him, panting heavily, eyes filled with a newfound resolve. "You're finished, Marcus. Justice will find you, whether you want it or not." Marcus only nodded weakly, all menace drained from his expression. In the aftermath, Kate quickly radioed for backup, reporting the situation, insisting firmly that immediate support was needed. Marcus's men scattered into the darkness, unwilling to challenge further with their leader defeated. Jasper stood loyally at James's side, nudging him gently, sensing the ordeal was finally over. Meanwhile, the injured lion gently approached its cub, releasing it carefully from the trap, licking its wounds tenderly, oblivious now to the humans nearby. James watched silently, humbled by the extraordinary courage he'd witnessed. The fierce instinct of protection, the unexpected bond forged from a single act of compassion. When backup finally arrived, headlights illuminating the chaotic scene, Marcus was taken into custody without resistance, shoulders slumped in defeat. Ranger Harold Brooks stepped forward, face weary yet sincere, shaking Kate's hand firmly. "I'm sorry I didn't support you sooner," he admitted quietly, eyes filled with regret. "Your bravery reminded me of what truly matters. I'll make sure this ends here." Kate nodded gratefully, relief evident in her expression, knowing at last the canyon's wildlife would be properly protected. James exhaled slowly, feeling the weight finally lifting from his shoulders. He looked again toward the lion, now safely retreating with its cub into the shadows. Gratitude and awe filled his heart, knowing tonight had irrevocably changed him. He'd stepped willingly into danger, placing everything at risk, discovering a strength within himself he hadn't realized existed, a strength born from compassion, courage, and sacrifice. A golden sunrise stretched across the Grand Canyon, the sky painted in delicate shades of rose and amber, gently illuminating the ancient cliffs and valleys. James Morgan stood once again on the familiar rocky outcrop, his lean figure silhouetted against the breathtaking expanse. Weeks had passed since that harrowing night, yet the memories remained sharp, etched vividly into his heart. The vast silence around him was a balm now, healing the echoes of chaos and fear that had once filled this same space. Below, the canyon stretched endlessly, a majestic testament to nature's grandeur and resilience. James took a slow, steady breath, inhaling the crisp, fresh morning air. Jasper sat obediently beside him, the loyal border collie's wise brown eyes scanning the horizon thoughtfully. Age had softened Jasper's movements, but his presence remained comforting, his black and white fur warmed by the early sun, a calm and steady guardian as always. Since the incident, life in Timber Ridge had shifted dramatically. Marcus Black's arrest and subsequent confession had shocked the tight-knit community, exposing not just a notorious poacher, but the corrupt influence that had shadowed their peaceful town for far too long. Ranger Kate Evans had become a respected figure, praised widely for her unwavering courage and integrity in bringing Marcus to justice. James, reluctantly but inevitably, found himself hailed as an unexpected hero, his quiet bravery transforming into an inspiring narrative spreading swiftly throughout the region. As James adjusted his camera tripod, preparing for the perfect shot of the awakening canyon, footsteps softly approached from behind. Turning, he found Kate making her way toward him, smiling warmly. She wore civilian clothes today, a simple white blouse tucked neatly into rugged jeans, brown hiking boots scuffed from frequent journeys into the wilderness. Her chestnut hair was loose, framing her face gently, highlighting eyes that held both kindness and strength. "Morning, James," she greeted softly, stepping beside him to appreciate the view. "Morning," James replied, matching her quiet tone. "Couldn't resist another sunrise, either?" Kate chuckled softly. "Something like that. It's peaceful out here." James glanced thoughtfully toward her. Since Marcus's arrest, they developed a strong friendship, born from shared experiences and unspoken understanding. "How's Marcus doing?" James asked gently. Kate sighed slightly, folding her arms. "Surprisingly cooperative. He's genuinely remorseful. Says being saved by someone he almost killed changed something deeply inside him. He's provided information that's helping dismantle the larger poaching network. A lot of powerful people are running scared." James nodded thoughtfully, feeling both relief and sadness. "I never expected to sympathize with someone like him." Kate touched his shoulder reassuringly. "Your choice showed Marcus a different path. That's real strength, James, compassion even toward those who've hurt us." They stood quietly for a long moment, watching as the sun rose higher, gently illuminating the expansive landscape. The silence between them was comfortable, shared reflections of lives irrevocably changed. Then, with a gentle nod, Kate departed quietly, giving James space to gather his thoughts. Later that afternoon, back in Timber Ridge, the local cafe bustled energetically as the lunch crowd arrived. Its owner, a cheerful older woman named Margaret Carter, moved swiftly among tables, greeting patrons warmly. Margaret, stout and lively at 65, was a beloved figure, her bright floral dresses and warm smile making everyone feel like family. Spotting James enter, she waved enthusiastically, calling him over. "James Morgan, our resident hero." Margaret beamed, pressing a fresh cup of coffee into his hands. "You can't hide from your fame forever, young man." James chuckled softly, accepting the coffee gratefully. "I'm not a hero, Margaret. Just did what needed doing." "Nonsense," Margaret replied firmly, patting his hand affectionately. "You inspired folks around here. People are talking more openly about protecting wildlife, standing up against corruption. That's heroism, whether you admit it or not." James smiled warmly, gratitude filling his chest. The cafe hummed gently around him, and for the first time, James allowed himself to truly feel part of the community. He realized his work had grown beyond photography. It now carried a deeper purpose, intertwining his passion with genuine impact. As months passed, Timber Ridge began to flourish anew, freed from the shadow of Marcus's dark influence. Conservation initiatives took center stage, championed by Kate and enthusiastically supported by residents now fully aware of the treasure in their own backyard. Harold Brooks, once hesitant under political pressure, regained his passion and dignity, publicly thanking Kate for helping him reclaim his purpose. James continued his photography, But his images now carried greater depth. His lens captured not just the beauty of the natural world, but its fragility and resilience. His latest exhibition, Guardian of the Canyon, resonated deeply with visitors, raising substantial support for wildlife protection. Yet, despite the accolades and growing recognition, James always returned quietly to the canyon, searching perhaps unconsciously for signs of a lion that had forever changed him. Then, one quiet morning exactly a year from their first encounter, James again stood atop the very cliff where he'd once made the fateful choice to save Marcus. Sunlight streamed gently across his face, warming his skin, the wind whispering through juniper branches. Jasper sat patiently at his side, eyes alert yet peaceful. Scanning the horizon, James's heart suddenly quickened. There, standing gracefully upon a distant ridge, silhouetted clearly against the brilliant sunrise, stood the mountain lion he'd rescued. The powerful creature gazing back at him, unmoving, calm yet alert. Their eyes met silently across the vast distance, unspoken understanding bridging the gap between them. James's breath caught in his throat, emotions swelling deeply inside him. Without warning, the lion lifted its head high, releasing a deep, resonating roar that echoed profoundly throughout the canyon, reverberating through stone and sky, filling James's soul with profound gratitude and humility. This was no mere sound. It was a declaration, a promise of mutual respect and guardianship, an acknowledgement that their bond, though forged in violence and chaos, now stood unbreakable. James closed his eyes briefly, absorbing the power of that moment, recognizing clearly that his life had irrevocably transformed, not simply by circumstance, but through conscious choices driven by compassion and courage. When he opened his eyes again, the lion had vanished quietly back into the canyon's hidden depths, leaving only silence behind. Smiling softly to himself, James gently rested his hand on Jasper's head, feeling contentment and purpose like never before. Together, they stood quietly for a long while, gazing thoughtfully across the magnificent landscape stretching endlessly ahead, a testament to nature's beauty and vulnerability intertwined forever with the lives of those courageous enough to protect it. In life, we sometimes face choices that test our courage, compassion, and humanity. James chose kindness even when fear and danger stood before him, reminding us all that even the smallest acts of mercy can change hearts and heal wounds far beyond our sight. Have you ever experienced a moment when kindness overcame fear? Share your stories below, and don't forget to subscribe to support our channel. May God bless each of you, protecting and guiding you in every step. If you believe in the power of compassion, comment Amen and spread the love.